Now I want to talk about some of the terms that are important to USPSA shooting. The first one is walkthrough. The walkthrough refers to the piece of paper that you'll find on each stage, the RO will generally be the one who reads, that describes the course of fire. On there you'll find the number of rounds required, what type of course of fire it is, how the scoring method works, the start position, and the procedure for shooting that course of fire, and anything else that pertains to that course of fire. One of the things on there is the type of course of fire. The most popular one in USPSA shooting today is Comstock. Comstock means you can shoot all you want. If a 24 round course of fire, for example, is a Comstock course of fire, you may shoot at least 24 rounds without penalty, and you can shoot 30 if you feel like it, or whatever number you feel like shooting. It's strictly the minimum number of rounds fired. Virginia count, on the other hand, is the exact number of rounds that you must fire. If you fire more than the number on a Virginia count course of fire, you can be penalized for extra shots and extra hits. Fixed time refers to a course of fire that's not very popular in USPSA anymore, but it is used sometimes. Normally the number of rounds is fixed and the time. You may have 4, 5 seconds, 6 seconds to shoot a course of fire. Normally the timer will buzz again a second time, telling you to stop, and anything after that we penalize as an overtime shot. Virginia count and fixed time are quite often used on something called standards. Standards are a course of fire that has multiple strings of fire. Typically these are simple courses of fire with a set number of targets and usually fired from 1 or 2 positions only. You may fire 6 from this position, 6 from that position. It's also something where you may have to do mandatory reloads. The only time you'll have to do mandatory reloads. You may have to shoot strong hand only or weak hand only. A class of fire is a special course of fire that's contained within a book that every match director in the country has. They're set up exactly the same at our club in York, Pennsylvania as a club in Washington State or Indiana. After you shot these courses of fire, they're sent into the national database where they're compared to other class fires shot by other shooters around the country, and that's how you're given your initial classification. To receive your initial classification, you need a minimum of 4 class fire stages shot that you've scored better than 2% on those courses of fire. That's not real hard to do as long as you're not shooting a lot of penalties and a lot of misses. A special class fire match contains 4 classifiers within one match. When you've completed those 4 stages successfully and they're sent to nationals, they'll go ahead and run those through the database and they'll give you your initial classification, and you can get that done in one match. Some clubs hold those, some clubs don't. That's strictly up to the match director. The match director at each club is the guy in charge. He makes the bulk of the main decisions, and he's the guy in charge of that match that day. Okay, now we're going to talk about something called procedurals, or procedural penalties. It's another kind of penalty, not as drastic as the match disqualification. These are a minus 10 point penalty typically, and they're for things like faulting or being outside of the area where you're supposed to shoot. There's one for failure to engage, or FTE. It means that you didn't shoot at a target that you were supposed to shoot at. Not only do you get the missed penalties and don't get the points you could have got, you get an additional 10-point penalty for not engaging that target at all. Another example of a procedural penalty would be failure to perform mandatory reload. If on perhaps a standards course of fire, it specifies you must perform mandatory reload after engaging the first 3 targets. If you don't, you will get 1 procedural penalty for each shot fired after the reload. So if it's 6 shots that you're supposed to fire after reload, and you do fire 6, but fail to do the reload, that's 60 points in penalties. Similar, also mainly on standards or classifiers, is failure to use the proper hand. If a course of fire specifies that you're supposed to shoot strong hand only and use both hands, or shoot weak hand only and use your strong hand, you can be penalized for that as well. The last term I want to cover here is calibration. Our steel targets, such as US poppers and full-size poppers, are calibrated, meaning that a 9mm when hit in the proper place, will knock those pieces of steel down. If they fall properly, that means they were calibrated properly. Now these are mechanical devices. They can get out of adjustment, and after they've been shot dozens or perhaps hundreds of times, they do come out of adjustment. If you think that's happened, you can ask for a recalibration, in which case a 9mm handgun with factory ammunition must be used, and there's actually parameters on the power factor of that ammunition. If during that calibration the popper is shot with the 9mm in the proper place and it falls, you get a penalty for not hitting that popper. If on the other hand they hit it in the proper place and it does not fall, you get a reshoot on that course of fire. This is all I really have planned for this series of videos at this time. There may be more later. If you have questions, be sure to put a comment on the bottom of the page on YouTube, and I'll try to answer those, and perhaps even do another video if one's warranted. Thanks for your time.